Hey guys, it's Mike here. Just going to do a quick tutorial on how to set up a quick FastAPI website. FastAPI is a pretty new Python 3 based web framework that has a lot of really nice new features that weren't available before. I'm just going to quickly run down through a quick history of various Python frameworks and how FastAPI differs from it. A lot of you are probably familiar with Flask. Flask is one of the originators of the micro framework. It's a quick web framework. It doesn't really have that much stuff included, but it's relatively easy to pick up and learn, which is probably its greatest strength. So I would call Flask and its larger cousin, the Django, kind of a Generation 1 web framework. This was kind of like the earlier web frameworks that came around about 8 or 9 years ago. Now, following that, there's a Generation 2 web frameworks. I mean, this is my terms. It's not really industry terms. Something like Sanic and AIO HTTP, which are also all Python 3, I would say Python 3.5 and up based web frameworks. The reason these are Generation 2 is because they have additional features like async, meaning asynchronous processing of your Python code, which makes it go way faster than before. And these are actually great frameworks, but there's a new generation, I would say Generation 3 or whatever you want to call it, but there's a new generation of web frameworks that came out about maybe 2 years ago, so around 2018, 2017, that are actually full range frameworks, meaning they have a lot of different things in them. One of the main ones is called Starlet, and this was created by the designer of API Star. API Star was a quick API framework. And this has, as you can see, this has a lot of functionality. It's got database, ORMs, meaning relationship managers. It's got authentication schemas, got tons of stuff that you would usually need it to set up a website. So what I want to focus today is FastAPI, which is built on top of Starlet. FastAPI gives you a lot of functionality, but I want to show you some of the really cool features that I love about this framework, and I've started using it as my main go-to web framework for anything from quick API configurations, setting up a basic HTTP callbacks. One of the examples that I use it now at work is if somebody needs to generate a report, let's say they do a curl call into an API schema, and FastAPI will go ahead and run a bunch of Python code asynchronously and generate reports. That's just one of the many examples you could use it for. In today's tutorial, I'm just going to show you how to set up a FastAPI project, how it's structured, and also how to set up HTML Jinja templating, meaning you're going to serve a website. And for this example, I'm going to show you how to set up a very basic bootstrap website. All right, let's get started. First, let me open up my let me go to my directory. So for example, just ignore that. I was updating my system here. I am in my home directory, and I created a new folder called FastAPI. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to use a tool called pipenv. If you're not familiar with pipenv, it's kind of like virtual environment for Python, but it's just a little bit more advanced. It's an easy way to manage your dependencies. You can install it on your machine if you do pip install pipenv, and that will go ahead and install that package on your machine. What I'm going to do here, I'm going to install a bunch of packages that I need for my FastAPI project, and I will go ahead and I will install FastAPI, and I'm going to use. Let me see what Python version I have here. I'm going to have. Let's see. I have Python 3.6. I thought I had 3.8. I'm going to use Python 3.6 for this project, which should work. It shouldn't be a problem. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do pipenv install Python 3.6. I'm going to tell it what Python to use, because you can also use Python 2, but you know, we don't want to do that. It's not supported anymore. And then I'm going to install FastAPI. And what this is going to do is going to generate a virtual environment in my home directory and install the necessary packages, including all the dependencies that FastAPI needs. And you're going to see it's going to, once I get into the virtual shell, you'll see all the Python packages that it installed automatically. Another great thing I love about pipenv is that it lets you easily run your projects through a section called scripts, and I'll show you how to do that, how to start up your entire website really easily. Now keep in mind what I'm doing here is it's kind of like my It's my own way of doing things. There's no set way to do it. It's not. It doesn't force you to structure your project in a specific manner. But this is kind of what I'm used to doing. It's very Flask-like. If you've installed Flask and worked with Flask, this will be very familiar to you. All right, so here we go. We have a pipenv environment, and as you can see, it generated a pip file. Pip file is basically your requirements.txt if you use virtualenv. You can see it installed the package, and star means just the latest version, basically. You can also pin it to a specific package version. And you can see it created a hidden directory in my home environment, in my home path, with the dependencies. Now, if you want to see what's inside that virtual environment, you just do pipenv shell, and now you're going to be inside your virtual environment. If you want to see what packages you have installed, you can do pip freeze, and as you can see, pipenv downloads all your dependencies automatically. You don't need to worry about this. Now, I need to also install additional dependencies to make our Jinja templates work. So I'm going to install Jinja 2, which is the Jinja templating framework. I'm going to install AIO files. That's to serve our static files, things like cascading style sheets, CSS, JavaScript, images. I'm going to install UVcorn, which is a web server. It's a Python-based web server that can spin up multiple workers to really make your website go faster, meaning your website can go in parallel. So if you can give it, let's say, 10 workers, it means you have 10 parallel threads. So you have 10 requests coming in simultaneously. They'll be handled independently of each other, meaning that your website is blazingly fast. All right, so I think that's all we need for now. Let me install that. Oops, what did I do? Pipenv, I need install. That's what I need. All right. Just go ahead and install that. Let me make my terminal bigger a little bit. All right, once that's done, what we can do is I'm going to go ahead and open my project. I'm using VS Code, very cool tool. Where is my project? Videos, FastAPI, there we go. All right. Just gonna go ahead and open that. All right, so I got the project opened up, and you can see the pip file shows all our packages are installed and ready to go. And what I'm going to do first, I'm going to create the initial project structure. Now, usually you can do this through automated way like cookie cutter, but I'm going to do it manually so you can understand the process of creating a new project. So here's my my project name. So let's call this one FastAPI. Actually, let's call this one tutorial. That's the name of the project, but you can name it whatever project you're working on. It doesn't matter what the name is. Underneath that, I'm going to create a new folder called static. And underneath that, again, I'm going to create a new folder called templates. That's where we're going to keep our HTML templates in. And lastly, I'm going to create a new folder called views. Views are going to be your routes, and I'll show you what those are all about. All right, so we got the main project folder called tutorial. We got we have three subfolders: static, templates, and views. And underneath here, we're going to create a new file called config. All right, let me see if I can, there we go, it's a little bit bigger. All right, so config is basically all your configuration variables. So for example, what port do you want to run this thing on, right? Let's just choose a port that's pretty high up, 5700, for example. All right, that's all for now. I'm just going to leave config as it is. And I'm going to create a new file called run. Run.py is basically the starter file from where everything starts off when you start the web server. So from here, I want to basically import UVcorn. UVcorn is our web server. I can't even pronounce anything today. Import UVcorn. Looks like it can't import it. Let me double check. What's in our... Yeah, UVcorn is there. I don't know why it's being yellow. Okay, let's see if it works. All right, so I'm gonna, from config, that's our config file, I'm gonna import port. All right, and that's it. And now I'm just gonna do the if name equals main. This is just the standard Python way to kick off your project, your main function. And I'm going to tell Uvicorn to run this thing, and I'm going to tell it tutorial. That's the name of our project. That's our folder. And inside that project, there's an object called app. We didn't create it yet, but we will in a few minutes. I'm going to say host equals, and I'm just going to run it on my local machine here. I have Linux Mint, so I'm just going to run it locally here. Port equals port. And to be actually super sure that it's an integer, not a string, I'm going to say int port. All right, and then reload, I'm going to say true, meaning that if I make any change to our code, to our Python code, the web server will automatically reload your entire code, so you don't need to keep, stopping it, restarting it, which is really nice. And debug, I'm going to say true. We want our debugging, we're developing, right? So it's all good. All right, so now for workers, I'm going to say 1 for now because we're still developing. We don't need too many parallel workers. This is the stuff that parallelizes your code. All right, this thing is ready to go. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to tutorial. I'm going to create a new file, and I'm going to create our init file. So right underneath tutorial, we can see the file path here. Tutorial on underscore init underscore .py, double underscore, whatever they call it. All right, so in this init.py, I'm just going to do a few imports. I'm going to do from FastAPI import FastAPI, right? Very simple. I'm going to do from FastAPI dot static files import static files. Now static files are just basically your CSS, your JavaScript, all that other stuff. You need to tell FastAPI what's the location of your static folder. It's not like Flask, it doesn't know automatically, so you need to tell it. From FastAPI.templating, I'm going to import Jinja 2 templates. We need that for our HTML files. All right, now I'm going to create an object called app. That's the stuff in our run.py file. And basically, I'm initializing the FastAPI web framework here. This is the main thing that basically runs the whole thing. Now, I'm also going to tell it to mount a static directory. So you need to do this in order for your web framework to know where your static directory is. So basically, this is just what I'm mounting. And I'm also going to say static files. I'm going to tell it what directory, where it's actually physically on my disk, right? So I'm just going to say tutorial dot root, meaning root of this whole thing. Then we go to tutorial, right? So tutorial folder right here. And then I'm going to say static. So here's your tutorial and then static. That's our path right here. And then we're going to give it a name. So the name is going to be static. That's what we're going to call this thing, static. All right, that's it. And now we just need to provide a templates. So templates equals Jinja templates directory, and we're going to tell it where. It's just like static. We're telling it where physically on the disk on the OS our template directory resides. So here's your templates. All right, we're ready to roll. And then from tutorial.views, we're going to import main view. So we didn't create this yet. We're going to do it right now. All right, so we are ready to go here. So this is done. And now I'm just going to go to views, and I will create a new file called main.py. That's our main view. A view is basically how you tell FastAPI like what to send. If somebody goes to a route, like let's say /users / blah, 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 right? You're telling it where to go. So you're going to say from tutorial import app template. So I'm telling it to go here, import this guy right here, and import templates, which is this guy right here. These two objects, I'm importing it in here. And also from FastAPI import request. We're going to need this thing to manage our HTTP requests. All right, now let's create our first route. This is the most basic one. This is just /home, your index file, right? Now, what's beautiful about FastAPI, it uses a request. If you ever use the Python module requests, very popular, right, to do HTTP curl calls. Now, requests has a really nice Pythonic interface, so you can do, requests.get and then some site.com, right? or you could do request.post. It's very simple to make your HTTP request. Now here we're going to do app.get, and then we're going to say the root directory. That's our decorator. It's just like Flask, so it's very, very similar to Flask. Now here, the difference between this and Flask is we have async, which makes it super fast. We're going to do an asynchronous function. My brain's not working today. We're going to call it index, or you can call it root, whatever you want to call this. But basically, this is the name of the function, and then we're going to say request, and we're going to make it turn it into a. This is called a pedantic modeling. You're telling it what kind of. So you're passing a variable in here, and you're telling it what this variable should be. This variable should be form of request. It should be a form of this object. Now this is almost kind of like compiled code, right? Because you're telling it, for example, in C or Golang, you have to say, for example, var name, and you have to say, for example, string, right? Or you can say, oops, my VS Code is acting up. String, or you can say var age, and you have to say int, for example, right? So you're declaring what type it is. So it's similar here. This is a new Python 3.5 or 3.6 functionality, where you can tell it pedantically what kind of variable type you need it to be. All right, so that's our very basic function. Now here we're going to do a very simple reply back saying, hey, you're home now. All right, so before we actually serve an HTML site, so I'm going to just basically serve something like this. As you can see from FastAPI docs, I'm just going to return a very simple message. I don't even need a request. So let me just do this first. So before we even do this, I'm going to take this out just to show you how this is working. I'm just going to return a simple message, hello world message, right? So this thing is ready to go. It's very bare bones, obviously. There's nothing much here, but let's run this thing. Now, the last thing I'm going to do, and this is a pipenv feature, which is really cool. I'm going to create a scripts directory, and scripts block. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell it what this does, and I can tell it what to run. So if I say pipenv run tutorial, I'm going to tell it, hey, go run this file. This is our startup file, this run.py. Remember, this kicks off the UVcorn web server. So in pip file, I'm going to say tutorial equals python run.py. Now look what happens when we run this. This is actually really nice. Where is my terminal? There is my terminal. All right, so if I go ahead and run pipenv run tutorial, it's basically this call name right here. It's going to kick off the web server. Cannot import name templates. Import app templates. Let me see what's going on here. Let me double check templates. That's why I named it templates. Of course. All right, there we go. Now look at this. I just saved that. The code is picked up automatically. And it's now telling me that it's going to serve this whole thing on port 5700. That's our port in our config.py. So there it is. So that it's serving localhost 5700. And as you can see, application startup is complete. We're ready to go, right? So let's take a look what this looks like. So I'm just going to go ahead and say HTTP localhost 5700. And we should get hello world, right? There it is. We get a hello world, as you can see. So this is very simple, obviously, very simple examples. Now I'm going to go ahead and I will copy our HTML files, and I'm going to go ahead to tutorial, and then I'm going to go to static. And I'm just going to copy Bootstrap website in here. So I'm going to put CSS and JS files into static, and I'm going to put all the index HTML files into the templates folder. So let me see if I have a, hold on one second. All right, so I copied over the templates, so you can see the index HTML. Now this is just a standard Bootstrap template. If you go to getbootstrap.com, you can download these for free. This is a very simple Bootstrap HTML template. Now the only thing I had to change here, to reference your CSS and JS files, you need to add a static route. So you can say URL for and then static and then give it a path. So you're going to say this is the path starting from static. So if you open up static, you can see these are all my static files, and here's vendor, and here's bootstrap, and here's all the subdirectories and all the stuff that you need to run it. And you kind of do it for anything that references a CSS or JS files. It's only 4 instances here, so it's pretty simple. All right, so that's already set up. I'm not going to go through the whole thing of how to add these, but it's pretty simple. Just unzip the bootstrap zip file and just put them all in here. So this is a very simple index page. Now what I'm going to do is just change our main view to tell it to serve the HTML page instead of the hello world. So let's go back to our hello world. Here I'm going to tell it to use a request because we need a request to serve the HTML page. And instead of message, I'm going to tell it to serve a Jinja template. So I'm going to say templates dot template response, and I'm going to say serve index, and it knows to pick it up from the templates directly because we defined it in the other init.py in the other file. And I'm going to tell it to also serve the request as well. This is the request that's coming in. So when we do an HTTP call, when we go to the port 5700, that's our request right there. All right, now I'm going to start the server up again. There it is, no errors. And as you can see, if I make any kind of changes to this file, save it, it'll automatically detecting file change right there. It's saying that. All right, let's run this. And I am going to go and run this again. I'm going to hit reload, and there it is. There's my bootstrap template. That's our HTML file right there. Very simple. Now I'm going to create another route. Let's say call it tutorial. Anything you want. You can really call it anything you want here. And I'm going to call this method tutorial. And here I am just going to say return. I'm going to return a message. So I'm going to say response, or let's say message. I'm going to say this is another route. And I'm also going to give it a documentation. So I'm going to give it doc strings, which basically says this is a tutorial function. To use this, run curl HTTP, blah, blah, blah. Let's say 0000, whatever that is, 5700/tutorial, right? So you're explaining how to use this function. Now, I'm going to show you why this is important, especially as your project gets bigger and bigger. You're going to have a lot of different functions. Doc strings is very important, especially for upkeeping code. But this is actually a really cool part of FastAPI, and I'll show you what this does. So first, let's take a look at the index HTML. So actually, we just saw it, right? So we just saw it. It serves that. Let's take a look at the second one. Now, if I go to /tutorial, it's going to give me that response, right? So let's test that. So if I go to /tutorial, that's our second function. And there it is. There's your message. This is another route. But check out what FastAPI automatically does for you with a tool called Swagger. Swagger is like it's a Python module that's built into FastAPI that does all this work for you. So for example, if you have multiple API routes, let's say you're serving reports, you're generating data, you're taking data, you're calculating it, returning results, whatever you're doing with your API, you can have a function to do that. Now, what FastAPI does, if you go to /docs, this is out of the box. You don't need to create this route, /docs. This is called FastAPI Swagger. You can see up top on the title, it says FastAPI Swagger UI. This is really useful. And what this does is just automatically show you your entire structure, right? And here's all our routes. We have 2 routes so far. And if you open this up, it gives you, that's your doc strings right there. That's your documentation we just did, which is really nice. You can also try it out, right? So you can execute this. You don't need to do it from the browser. You can just do it directly from the Swagger page. And there's your message. And you can do, it's a quick way to test your routes, especially if you have post routes that are more than, it's more than just a regular get call. So this is very useful and you're gonna really appreciate this as your project gets really more complex and more, more heavy with your API calls. All right, so that's Swagger, just something to note. All right, now we saw how to create a index template, how to serve a HTML template, how to look at documentation for your additional routes, and I'm just going to show you how to create a background task. So background tasks are really useful if you're doing a lot of heavy I/O processing. Let's say you have, let's say 10 calls per 3 seconds. Let's say somebody hits your website and they're downloading data from a database, which means you have an I/O process right there. Your Flask API, Fast API, Flask API, that's funny. It needs to access your database, pull out data, do something to that data, and send it back to the user, whoever requested that API. Now, normally, I've seen this on Flask. If you're running Flask on Python 2.7, what will happen is if your I/O call is very long and it takes forever to process that call, your whole web framework will be tied down, meaning you're not going to get requests coming in additionally. So anybody else who follows up on top of the first user will just be waiting and waiting and waiting until the first user is complete, and then their request will be processed. So it's very, it'll interrupt your service. Now with background tasks and also using parallelism through workers, through UVcorn workers right here, we can mitigate that, right? So we can do async. First of all, we have async functions, which are asynchronous, but we can also do background tasks. So let's do that. So I'm going to create a new file called new view called tasks.py. And I'm going to create a background background task that will run in the background while the user gets a reply right away. So let's do from FastAPI import request status and background tasks. I'm also going to do from FastAPI.response import JSON response. So this is kind of like JSONify in Flask. It's just you're dumping JSON out back to the user. So anything you generate, you can transform it into a JSON. All right, rock and roll, man. And let's see. So from tutorial, from our main project, I'm going to import app and templates. And actually, probably don't need templates, but I'm just going to import it anyway. I'm also going to import time because we're going to need to do some sleep command to sleep. I'll show you why. And from datetime, import datetime. This is to get our current timestamp. All right, so now I'm going to create a function called, this is not an async, this is a regular function. I'm going to call it run task. The reason it's not asynchronous is because we're going to, what we're going to do is here, we're going to make a call to an API endpoint, and our FastAPI is going to write down whatever data is incoming. It's going to write it down physically onto a file on our server. Okay, so we're going to give it a name, which is a string. So again, we're using the pedantic, which meaning we're defining our variables, and we're going to give it an ID of none for now. So default is none. So ID is basically just so name and ID. These two things, we can give it whatever we want. I'm just using this as an example, so it'll make more sense in a few minutes. And here I'm going to make it sleep for 3 seconds. So we kind of want to give it a little bit of time space, kind of simulate a heavy I/O process. So I'm going to make it sleep for 3 seconds. Now we're going to create a new file. So anytime API comes in, we're going to create a new file, or we're going to open it and write down whoever's coming into our API. We're going to write it down into a file. So let's call it tasks.out.txt. And we're also going to give it a mode of A, so we can add on to it. We don't need to recreate it every time. We can just write additional content into it. We're going to open it as file. Now is going to be datetime.now. So this is the current timestamp at the moment this function is called, this run task function. Content is going to be, let's make it f strings. F string is basically your You can embed variables directly into your strings here. So it's going to be name. I'm going to give it an ID. You can give it whatever you want here. These don't really matter. These are just placeholders just to show you how the data gets pushed. And then give it a timestamp, the current timestamp, and a line break. All right, so this is ready, and I'm just going to tell it to write down whatever comes in into the file. Write down the content. So what this is going to do is write it into the tasks out.txt. All right, so this function is ready. That's our worker task process. All right, and now I'm going to say, I'm going to create a new route called app.post. Now the other ones were app.get. This one is app.post. We're going to post to it. And the path is going to be task run name. This is going to be our username, and then an ID that we're going to pass on to the process. Again, these don't really mean anything. It's just for to show you how it's going to work. All right, and this one is going to be an async process. I'm going to call it task run. You can. I usually make these match whatever my path is, so it's not confusing. But you can give it a different name if you want. I'm going to tell it name is a string. ID is an int. And also I'm going to say background tasks. And there's a third input variable here called background tasks. And the type of that is the background tasks that we imported from FastAPI. So this is an object, FastAPI object. A class, really, it's a class. All right, and I'm going to give it a doc string, which is just a good good practice to follow. So takes in a task and writes it into a file. That's our doc string. All right, so I'm going to tell it to background tasks, and I'll say add task. This is all FastAPI right here, and it's really sweet. This is actually, I actually use this more than things like Celery. Celery is pretty complex to set up. This is very simple. And I'm going to tell it to run task. Now, the reason my run task function has a underscore in front of it, this is to kind of separate public and private functions. So this function right here is a public function. Anybody can hit this API. As you can see, this is a private function because there is no @ decorator here. So this is an internal function. So I separate the naming just to give it, anything with a underscore in front, meaning it's a private function. It's not true private like in Java sense. Like if you're programming Java, there's private and public in a true sense. This is more of, I guess, to make it more clear to the programmer what it is. But it's not really a security feature. It doesn't really block anything. All right, so I'm going to give it run task, name and ID. So I'm passing all this information into the worker thread, into this guy right here. All right, and I am going to say return. I'm going to return a message. I'm going to saying, here's my message. This is the message to the user, whoever initiates the API, right? So I'm going to say f strings, task, name, ID, let's say ID, is being run. Okay, that's all we need for now. So I'm just going to give a basic output to the user saying, hey, your stuff is being run on, don't worry, no problem. I'm just going to add a line break at the end here. All right, let me close the bracket, and this puppy is ready to go. Let me save that. Our server reloaded. So now to test that, right? So let's test. So we just need task, run, name, ID. But before you even do that, again, you can use Swagger. So check this out. Refresh that. Let me close that. Oh, I forgot to. So as you can see, our new function is not showing up here. Why is that, right? If you go back to your init.py, you need to import your view. So we created a new view called tasks. We forgot to import it though. I forgot to do it. So here is our tasks. It's basically the same name as your tasks.py, same name as your file, right? And it's complaining about something. no module found, FastAPI response. Let me go back to see what it's complaining about. FastAPI.response. Oh, it's responses. I always leave off the S. All right, here we go. Now it's going to start up. Now, if we refresh this page, you're going to see your routes. So check this out. This is really cool. So if you do post, that's our doc strings again. I'm going to try it out. For name, I'm going to say Joe. For ID, I'm going to say, let's say 1. Now, look what's going to happen. There's our message. Task Joe ID 1 is being run. That's the message that the user will see. But let's see if it actually generated a file and wrote this stuff into the file, right? So let me stop this for a second. There it is, the file, as you can see. It generated this file, tasks.out. There it is. There's our name, that's our ID, and that's our timestamp. Now, let's do something really cool. Let's do a performance testing on this. So I'm going to hit this thing as hard as I can in terms of how many requests I'm going to do. I am going to go and put in a for loop in Bash to go ahead and submit thousands of requests at once. So you're going to see the real power of FastAPI and how it handles it. Now check this out. All right, I'm just going to open up a terminal shell here. I got my HTOP running on my local laptop here. You can see this HTOP just shows you all the processes. You can see my memory is about usage about half. CPUs are pretty stable, right? They're not highly used right now. So what I'm going to do, I am going to create a for loop. So let me just put that in here. Actually, let me go to Bash. I'm using fish shell. All right. So here is my for loop. What I'm saying, this is Bash, so don't focus on too much on this. I'm going to say hit my task run, and here I'm going to basically give it a so for example, here's my name and here's the ID. All right. So I'm going to say, so put in a for loop for 1,000 times. So it's going to cycle through 1 to 1,000 really fast. And it's going to do a curl call into our API. All right, so that's one, right? I'm going to do 4 of these just so you see the speed of this thing. Let me copy that. I'm not going to fire it off just yet. So this is kind of a quick and dirty way to do performance testing on your, I forgot my Bash again, to do performance testing on your web framework. Oops, yeah, I ran it too fast. Did not want to do that. Give me a second. All right, so that's our second window. Let me open up a third one. Let me put that over here. Let me open up a third one. Bash. Fish shell does not like this Bash formatting. All right, so here we go. Now this one I'm just going to change it to, instead of Joe, I'm going to call it Bob, right? Instead of this one, I'm just going to, so you kind of see where it's coming from. Let's call this one Mary. So the girls don't get mad at me. I'm including them. All right. Okay, so I got 3 terminals open. I'm going to run 3 concurrent curl commands. So it's 3,000 total calls, right? And you're going to see the CPU ticks. So you're going to see barely movement on these, meaning our FastAPI is so efficient, you're going to barely see any changes to my resource use in terms of CPU and memory. Let me just remove this file, tasks out. All right, let's run this puppy again. Port 5700, and let's kick this off. So you're going to see it generate a bunch of curl commands. So there we go. That's 1,000, that's 2,000, that's 3,000. And those are all curl calls it's making. So you can see my CPU kind of hit up a little bit. Memory is still the same, and now it's going to drop again. Now keep in mind, this is a laptop. This is not a server. If you're running this on a proper web server, you're not going to see any differences. So there it is. So CPU dropped again, and it's done. So now if you go back here, if you tail that file, that's your FastAPI processing all your curl calls and writing to file. That's basically your database I/O. You can think of it that way. And you can see each one, the count, right? So 1 to 1,000. So right now it's pretty slow. Now a way to increase this is to run this in parallel. meaning add additional workers. Now what's happening is because we only have one UV-corn worker, only one worker thread is doing all this. So it's still pretty slow, right? I mean, it's taking like over like almost a minute now, and it's like maybe a third of the way done. It should be up to like 900 for each one. So let me stop that, and I'll show you how to run it properly. So let's say if you're doing production, what you want to do is basically go to your run.py, change the reload to false, because on production you don't want it to reload code right away, and I'm going to put debug to false because we're running production now, right? For workers, I'm going to go ahead and give it 30 workers. So meaning we're going to have 30 parallel FastAPI threads at the same time. So it's going to be very, very fast. All right, I want to start it up. Now, you're going to see a lot of FastAPI parallel threads going up right now. Hold on, it's already in use. Let me take a look, because I kind of killed it improperly. Let me kill that thread, 519. All right, let's try it again. There she goes. All right, now if you do a PSEF grep Python, there's our threads. That's 30 workers, UV-corn workers, as you can see. All right, so it should be much faster now. Let me do this. Let me take this out. Let's run this again, and you're going to see how much faster this goes. Let me bring this up. All right, here we go. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Kick him off, kick him off, kick him off. Now, you see the speed? You see how much faster it is? It's already up to a third in less than, what, 3 seconds? It's going to be done in under a minute, probably under 30 seconds. It's done. Oh, not yet, almost. So we're up to about 20 seconds now. But because we have 30 UV-corn threads running at the same time, you can see the speed is drastically increased. They're up to what, 800, 900 now, right? Let me make this a little bit bigger. Oop. I think I killed it accidentally. Yeah, I pressed Control-C. But anyway, you can see they're all up to 1,000 almost. This one is still a little bit in 500s. But this shows you that the workers make a huge difference. And you know, if you're in a proper production server, up this to at least 50, and you're going to see crazy performance, up to Golang level performance, very fast. Anyway, this is the end of the tutorial. Let me know if you have any questions. Hope this helps.